We're there.
Shoreline first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Are you okay with that?
Sure.
Okay. So we're going to do shoreline first.
So I guess, based on my read on all the written testimony and the testimony we heard today, to me, I heard issues in the definitions and the no needs. And we discussed it some already, but possibly the enforcement and maybe the calculation of the setback line.
Okay. So you want to, if
So
you're
I
going
guess,
to pull one at a time, let us know which page you're on. So
How
we can
about
follow you.
just to start in order,
Okay.
definitions?
Yep. Sounds great. So definitions start on page 203-5, section 3, definitions.
Yes. Okay, so one thing from testifiers was the definition of coastal dune to acknowledge or include aeolian, windblown dunes.
Yep.
But we were told to ask the department for.
Yes. Hello?
Yeah.
Okay. This is Tara with UHC Grant. Yep, I appreciated the testimony. The purpose of defining coastal dunes is so that the rules support the protection and conservation of them, as well as enabling restoration of coastal dunes where possible. And so certainly we would want the definition to be consistent with that intent. And as I listened to the testimony, I understood that maybe the definition as written was not as inclusive of all types of coastal dunes as it should have been. It's always a challenge to get the wording just right. And so based on my understanding of that concern, I did quickly come up with some adjustments that I think will address the concern. And that would make it, I think, both more specific and more inclusive as well. I haven't passed this by the department, so I don't know if it's okay to make suggestions.
Roll it on the tongue.
Okay.
Let's go.
Should I put it on the screen?
You can read it first and up to you. Yeah.
Okay, so if you're looking at your existing definition.
And I'm going to interrupt you. We're on page 203-6, and we're pretty much right in the middle of the page, coastal dune.
Okay, and I'm actually looking in the SMA rules. It should be the same.
Oh,
yeah.
And
So
if we make changes, we
Yes.
need to make sure that we.
That's right.
Yeah.
We're on the same page.
Side by side.
Okay. Coastal dune means one of possibly several continuous or nearly continuous mounds or ridges of unconsolidated. That's existing. And what I'm proposing to add would be wind or wave-driven marine sand that is often parallel to the beach. And end with that. It's very simple. It removes the latter part of the definition that previously said situated so that it may be accessible to storm waves and seasonal high waves for release to the beach. All of that really focused on the dunes that are just adjacent to the shoreline, but not being inclusive of inland dunes that groups may want to protect or restore.
So to be clear, from the word situated all the way down to offshore waters, you're going to delete?
That part is deleted. Yes, after the word beach.
Oh, beach. Okay.
Yeah. So you remove situated, everything situated onward. And then there were some additions I had in there as well. So I can reread that.
This is not my area of expertise, and but I feel like as long as you're including the wind and the ones that aren't impacted by the actual waves.
Yeah. So
That was
the
the goal.
original definition was basically agnostic on the type of dune it would have been. So it was meant to be inclusive of both wind-built dunes and wave-built dunes, but it didn't say that. And so hearing the testimony, I realized we could be more specific about that and say wind or wave-driven marine sand, which is more inclusive of all types of dunes.
I like it. Okay. What do you think about that, Commissioner Vice Chair there?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Okay.
If it sounds good to you, I think it sounds good to me.
Okay. So any questions on the wording?
Could I ask
Yeah,
a
Mr.
question?
Buca, go.
To Tara, yeah, Jim Buca, Planning Department, about quote unquote man-made dunes, right? Something where we are restoring a dune. Would that be those aren't wind-driven or marine created, but we are constantly creating dunes, right?
We're restoring dunes. So we're
Restoring.
restoring what would have existed in nature anyway, which would have been a wind or wave built dune. So I don't think you have to specify anything else. That would be
Okay.
my.
Because when one is taken out, we're trying to restore it. And so this would cover it.
Yes.
And we have the intent on record now. Okay. Well, it's up to you, Commissioner Thayer. Do you want to put a little extra something? Yeah, go ahead. Director.
I'm curious why you're deleting all the rest of the language.
Right. So if you read the last part, I think this is the part that was giving the testifiers concern, or part of the reason. It says situated so that it may be accessible to storm waves and seasonal high waves for release to the beach or offshore waters as defined by Chapter 20, which is the grading code. This was mirrored after the definition in the grading code, though the grading code's mission is a little different than the mission of these rules. The grading code specifically only deals with preventing the destruction of dunes in the shoreline setback area. But I think these rules, the SMA rules and the shoreline rules, the intent may be to restore dune systems that are right along the shoreline, but also could be the inland dune systems that exist in central Maui or farther away from the shoreline at, say, like Waihe'e, where Hilt has their wetland and dune restoration projects. And so this hadn't occurred to me until I heard the testimony, but I think that gets so specific that it isn't inclusive of all of our dune systems on the island.
So removing it doesn't mean that that's not applicable here. You're just removing it so it doesn't seem so inclusive.
So it is, the definition is more inclusive.
More inclusive.
Yes.
You're including more.
Does that?
types. Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, I'm with you. But is that what?
It is now, though, inconsistent with the definition that's in Chapter 20.
Which is tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But again, I think there's a different mission there. That's trying, their definition of coastal dune exists so that they can administer the provision that that you cannot grade a primary coastal dune.
Right. But sometimes that's going to overlap, isn't it? Or we're going to have these overlaps sometimes.
Right. And if we broaden this definition as proposed, we would be including all coastal dunes.
Okay.
Inland and the ones that are right on the shoreline.
Okay. And not limiting what they have already in the.
And not limiting to just the more specific subset that the grading code addresses.
Okay.
It does create an inconsistency, though, in definitions.
I do have, so because it creates the inconsistency, how are we supposed to administer this as far as getting a grading permit or not needing a grading permit? But now you've triggered this.
So if you're working on a shoreline property and
Not a short, okay, so my concern is more the Mauka, because that's what we're taking, that's what we're now adding.
right, we're including
Yes.
Malka now.
Yeah.
Yes.
What if it's applicable? So if we're talking about Malka, but in this application, Malka is not applicable to this application, then it's not applicable.
It's, yeah.
But if there is a property that has inland area that's now applicable, then does that help?
No, I mean, if it's within the SMA, it's within the SMA, no matter where it's at. So, it could be up to the highway
Yeah.
in Kihei, and that's going to be included.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm just trying to think about what's going to happen when you don't need a grading permit because it hasn't triggered that requirement under chapter 20.
Yeah. Right.
What are we going to look at? Because we're not the authority on grading.
Well, if there is grading happening on a property, there has to be a grading permit, and then the grading.
Depending on, well, there's definitions of what triggers a permit or not. So say it doesn't trigger a permit. I guess it's just still come in for an SMA. Or, yeah.
So can I ask a question?
Yes, Commissioner.
So, you're talking about a scenario if there's a lot within the SMA that they have dunes on their land that they need to grade.
Or they're just
Or-
doing an activity that's
Yeah,
within.
like planting a tree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Planting a tree.
Okay. And that would be subject to a grading permit?
No,
Okay.
but what would they be subject to now?
If we change this language and incorporate these dunes that we weren't normally incorporating, this might trigger it, not from the other code, is what she's saying. Since they're going to be inconsistent.
Okay, so so that means that action that didn't necessarily need a grading permit before might need one now.
If we're including those.
No, they still wouldn't be subject to the permit. They would be subject to SMA, and I'm just wondering what that means.
Yeah. So if you plant a tree in a coastal dune that's a sensitive area, how does the planner assess that? Does that mean you're negatively affecting the dune or positively affecting the dune?
Well, then couldn't you just leave the language in there and include the wind dunes and other dunes? If you left the language in there, you're still talking about location of where the dunes are. So taking the language out is not going to hurt it. And then you can be consistent with the code. No?
Well, depends.
I understand what the director is saying. If you remove that language and you expand the area defined as coastal dune, it may require further assessment by the department. And I don't know if that's a bad thing or a good thing.
I just think we've expanded it to such a degree that we haven't even looked at it, that I would rather keep the language the way that it is now. You could add in the wind. And again, you're going to see us again. And that's something that maybe we could assess a little bit.
When we look at it.
Yeah. I could just foresee this becoming, I'd like to look at it better.
No, I understand. Yes. And we do have maps to sort of depict where all the coastal dune systems are. And maybe that would be something you'd want to look at and analyze. I do understand that. Maybe you're right, though, adding wind or wave driven marine sand would at least partially address the testifier's concern. Yeah.
Great.
I have a comment. Just in addition, could we just add another sentence, leave that there, and then add something that would talk about aeolian sands or marine-driven dune sands?
But we're suggesting to just add that qualifier. So it would say ridges of unconsolidated wind or wave-driven marine sand. You don't even have to add another sentence to cover that.
But as only one sentence, you're only talking about dunes on the shoreline as opposed to inland dunes. So we could add a sentence about to include inland.
That's where, Jim, that I have a concern, and I would like to look at that further on what that means.
Yes. Understood.
Okay.
Okay.
I just,
So we would leave the whole in the situated so that remains in the definition.
VP
I guess it does say coastal dune and not
inland.
sand dune or
Right.
inland
Yeah,
dune.
yeah.
That's right.
there's a difference.
Yeah.
So, yep.
So are you okay with the most recent revision of wind?
I think the main thing is to add in wind driven sand,
Marine sand.
marine sand.
Wind or wave driven
Yes.
marine sand.
Yes.
Marine
I
sand.
think
Which
as
are
long
the,
as those
the
are
two
both
processes that create
right.
coastal dunes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Phew. Okay. Well, sorry about that, guys. Thank you. This is good stuff. Any questions? Otherwise, we're going to go to our vote. Yes. Miss Thackerson.
Just because I'm the one who's going to have to edit these rules later, can I please reread the definition?
Oh, yes. Good idea.
Coastal dune means one of possibly several continuous or nearly continuous mounds or ridges of unconsolidated wind or wave driven marine sand, and then continuous and immediately landward of the beach, such like etc. As stated in the
Yeah. Got it. Okay.
This should be for both SMA and since we're looking
Yes,
at
I
it.
made that
yeah,
note.
Same.
Okay. So, commissioners, that was the definition of the revision recommended by Vice Chair Thayer on coastal dune that will carry with both SMA and Shoreline, assuming the vote goes. So let's go down the roll call.